The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered wooden platform that served as Silver Hollow's depot. Sarah Colleen gripped the worn leather handle of her canvas bag tighter as the driver called out through the howling wind. "End of the line. Miss, best hurry inside before this storm gets worse." She stepped down into the swirling snow, her boots sinking into the fresh powder that had already begun to accumulate on the wooden planks. 4 years. 4 years since she'd fled this place with nothing but shame burning in her chest and her father's debts hanging over her head like a noose. The wind whipped her auburn hair across her face, and she pushed it back with fingers already growing numb from the cold. Silver Hollow looked smaller than she remembered, its buildings huddled together like cattle seeking warmth. The familiar sight of Henderson's General Store, the Silver Dollar Saloon, and the modest church at the end of Main Street brought back memories she'd tried to bury. "You getting your bags, miss?" The driver's voice cut through her thoughts. "This is all I have," she said, holding up the single canvas bag. He gave her a look that mixed pity with curiosity, but said nothing more. The stagecoach pulled away, leaving her standing alone on the platform as snow began to fall harder. The inn's windows were dark. A hastily scrawled sign on the door read, "Closed, gone to Denver." Sarah's heart sank. She'd counted on at least one night at the inn to gather her courage before facing what she'd come here to do. She pulled her worn coat tighter and started down Main Street. The few people hurrying past kept their heads down against the storm, but she caught glimpses of recognition in their eyes. Mrs. Patterson from the Mercantile stopped mid-stride, her mouth falling open before she quickly looked away and scurried inside. Tom Bradley, who used to work at the livery, touched his hat brim but didn't meet her eyes. Well, Sarah Colleen's back." She turned to find Jake Morrison standing in the doorway of the saloon, a sardonic smile playing at his lips. He'd aged in 4 years, lines creasing his face, his hair showing gray at the temples. "Jake," she acknowledged with a nod. "Heard you went east. Thought you'd found yourself a fancy life in Philadelphia or somewhere." "I worked," she said simply. "Saved money." "For what? There's nothing here for you anymore. Your pa's house." "I know who has it." She cut him off. "That's why I'm here." Jake's eyebrows rose. "You're going to take on Lucas Wren, girl. You always were too headstrong for your own good." The name still had the power to make her chest tighten. Lucas Wren. The boy who'd given her her first kiss behind the schoolhouse when they were 15. The man who'd stood silent when her father was dragged from their home, when the bank seized everything. The man who now owned the biggest ranch in the valley and held the deed to her father's house. "I'm not taking on anyone," Sarah said. "I'm simply going to discuss business with Mr. Wren." Jake laughed, a harsh sound that competed with the wind. "Business? That what they're calling it now?" He shook his head. "Storm's getting worse. You'd best find shelter soon, though I doubt anyone in town will." "I'll manage," she said, turning away before he could finish. The wind had picked up considerably, driving snow horizontally across the street. Sarah knew she had 2 choices: seek shelter with someone in town, who would surely turn her away, or head out to the Wren Ranch now. It was 3 miles outside town, a dangerous walk in this weather, but her pride wouldn't let her beg for help from people who'd watched her family fall apart without lifting a finger. She set her jaw and started walking toward the edge of town, where the road led out to the ranches. The snow was already knee-deep in places where it had drifted, and her skirts grew heavy with moisture. Her fingers were numb inside her thin gloves, and she could no longer feel her toes. By the time she reached the gate marking the entrance to the Wren Ranch, she was shivering violently. The house loomed in the distance, its windows glowing warm with lamplight. She'd been here before, years ago, when Lucas's mother was still alive and invited the town ladies for tea. Now it seemed like a fortress, imposing and unwelcoming. Sarah pushed through the gate and struggled up the long drive. Her legs felt like lead, and more than once she stumbled, catching herself on the fence posts that lined the way. The snow was blinding now, and she could barely make out the house ahead. The front door opened before she reached the porch, and a figure stepped out, backlit by the warm light from inside. Even through the storm, she knew that silhouette. Broad shoulders, tall frame, the way he stood with his weight slightly on his left leg, an old injury from breaking horses. "What in hell?" Lucas Wren's voice carried over the wind. He came down the steps 2 at a time, reaching her just as her knees buckled. Strong arms caught her, and suddenly she was being half carried up the steps. The warmth of the house hit her like a wall, making her gasp. He deposited her in a chair by the large stone fireplace, then stepped back, his face unreadable. "Sarah Colleen," he said, and she couldn't tell if it was a statement or a question. She looked up at him through hair plastered to her face by melted snow. He'd changed. The boyish softness was gone, replaced by sharp angles and weather-worn skin. His dark hair was longer than fashion dictated, curling slightly at his collar, but his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once looked at her with such tenderness, were cold as the blizzard outside. "Lucas," she managed through chattering teeth. "You trying to kill yourself walking out here in this weather?" The inn was closed. "So you thought you'd just freeze to death on my doorstep instead?" His voice was harsh, but she noticed him grab a blanket from the back of the sofa and wrap it around her shoulders. "I came to discuss my father's house." He stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Nothing to discuss. I bought it legal, paid the bank what was owed." "I know." She pulled the blanket tighter, trying to stop shivering. "I want to buy it back." "It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale if the price is right." He studied her for a long moment. "You've been gone 4 years, and the first thing you want to talk about is property. What else would we have to talk about?" The question hung between them, loaded with all the things they'd never said. He turned away, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she remembered. "You can't stay here," he said finally. "I'm not asking to. Just let me warm up, and I'll go." "Go where you planning to build a snow cave?" He gestured toward the windows, where the storm raged even fiercer than before. "There's nowhere in town that'll take you in, and we both know it." She lifted her chin. "That's not your concern." "Like hell it isn't. I'm not having your death on my conscience." "Since when do you have a conscience?" The words were out before she could stop them, sharp as shattered ice. He flinched, just slightly, but she saw it. "Fair enough," he said quietly. "But you're still not going back out in this storm." He moved toward the door. "There's an empty stall in the barn. It's warm enough. And there's clean straw. You can stay there tonight." "The barn." She stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "You'd put me in the barn." "It's that or the storm," he said without turning around. "Your choice." Pride warred with survival instinct. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows. She could barely feel her feet, and her hands were still numb despite the fire's warmth. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. He led her back outside, but this time through a covered walkway that connected the house to the outbuildings. The barn was warm and dry, smelling of hay and horses. He showed her to an empty stall at the far end, away from the animals. "There are blankets in the tack room," he said. "I'll have someone bring you food." "Lucas." She stopped him as he turned to leave. "About the house. I'm serious. I have money saved." "We'll talk tomorrow, if you're still here." "What's that supposed to mean?" He looked back at her, and for just a moment, she thought she saw something flicker in those cold gray eyes. Storm might blow out by morning, road might be clear, you might decide there's nothing here worth staying for after all. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the stall with only the sound of horses shifting in their sleep and the wind screaming outside. Sarah sank down onto the straw, exhaustion finally overtaking her. She'd made it to Silver Hollow. She'd faced Lucas Wren. Tomorrow, she'd fight for what was hers. But tonight, she pulled the rough blankets around herself and tried not to remember the boy who used to hold her hand and promise her the world. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd put her in a barn like she was no better than one of his horses. Still, he'd taken her in. He could have left her to the storm. Sarah closed her eyes, listening to the wind. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. Tonight, she was alive, and that was enough. For now. Sarah woke to the sound of horses nickering and the pale light of dawn filtering through the barn's high windows. Her body ached from sleeping on straw, and her dress was wrinkled beyond repair. She stood slowly, brushing hay from her hair, and nearly jumped when she found Lucas standing at the stall entrance, holding a cup of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, his voice neutral. She took the cup, careful not to let their fingers touch. The coffee was hot and strong, exactly how she remembered he liked it. "Thank you." He leaned against the stall post, studying her with those gray eyes that gave nothing away. Gone was any trace of the young man who'd carved their initials in the old oak tree by Miller's Creek. This Lucas Wren wore his authority like armor, clean-shaven jaw set firm, shoulders broad beneath his work shirt, hands scarred from years of ranch work. "Storm passed," he said. "Road to town is clear if you want to leave." "I told you why I'm here. That hasn't changed. And I told you the house isn't for sale." Sarah set down the coffee cup on a barrel. "I worked 4 years. Lucas, seamstress work in Boston. 12 hours a day. Sometimes more. Every penny I could save. I saved for this." "Why?" The question came sharp. "Why that house? It's nothing special. 4 walls and a leaking roof. It's all I have left of him." "Your father," Lucas's laugh was bitter. "The man who drank away everything you had, who borrowed against that house 3 times over, that's what you want to preserve. You wouldn't understand. Try me." She met his gaze squarely. "Because someone who'd stand by and watch while a family gets destroyed wouldn't understand loyalty." His jaw tightened. "That what you think happened? I know what happened. I was there. Remember when the bank came? When Sheriff Morrison served the papers? You were there too, standing on your porch, watching. You were 17 years old. You didn't know everything. I knew enough." He pushed off from the post, pacing to the barn door and back. The morning sun caught the silver threads in his dark hair premature. She thought, he wasn't yet 30. "Your father came to me first," he said finally. "Before the bank. Asked me to buy the house. Give him cash to pay his debts. I agreed." Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her. "What?" "Gave him $500, more than the place was worth. He promised to sign the deed over." Lucas's mouth twisted. "He took the money to the Silver Dollar and lost it all in one night. Then he went to the bank and borrowed against the house again." "You're lying." "Ask Jake Morrison. He was there. Dealt the cards himself." Sarah sank down onto a hay bale, her legs suddenly weak. It sounded like something her father would do. James Colleen had always been chasing the big win, the score that would solve all their problems. "Even if that's true," she said quietly, "it doesn't change anything. I want to buy the house." "With what seamstress wages?" "I have $800. His eyebrows rose. "That's a lot of stitching." "I'm good at what I do." "Was." She lifted her chin. "It's enough for a down payment. I'll pay the rest over time." "And how do you plan to do that? You think anyone in Silver Hollow's going to hire James Colleen's daughter?" "I'll figure it out." He studied her for a long moment. "You always were stubborn as a mule. And you always were cold as winter ice." "Was I?" He stepped closer, and suddenly the stall felt too small. "That what you remember?" Sarah stood, backing up until she hit the wall. "Don't." "Don't what? Remind you that we meant something to each other once." "That was a long time ago. We were children." "Were we?" He was close enough now that she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, smell the leather and soap scent of him. "Is that why you ran? Because we were children?" "I ran because there was nothing left for me here." "Nothing!" His voice dropped low. Not even. Mr. Wren, a voice called from outside. You wanted to check the north pasture this morning. Lucas stepped back. The moment shattered. Coming, Ben, he called. To Sarah, he said, Wait here. For what? Just wait. He strode out of the barn, leaving her trembling against the wall. 4 years she'd been gone. 4 years of trying to forget the feel of his hands in her hair, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer. She'd told herself it was young foolishness, that what they'd had wasn't real, but her traitorous heart still raced from his nearness. She forced herself to move, to leave the stall and walk to the barn door. The ranch stretched out before her in the morning light, neat fences, well-maintained buildings, cattle dotting the distant pastures. Lucas had built something good here, something solid, everything her father never could. Miss Colleen. She turned to find a young ranch hand holding a bundle. Mister, Wren said to give you these. They belong to his mother. Sarah took the bundle, a clean dress and undergarments. Lucas's mother had been gone 2 years now, taken by fever. She'd been a small woman, like Sarah, and the clothes would likely fit. There's a pump out back if you want to wash up, the boy added. Cookie's got breakfast in the main house when you're ready. I don't think... Mister, Wren said you're to eat before you go anywhere. The boy grinned. And nobody argues with the boss. After washing and changing, Sarah felt almost human again. The dress was simple blue calico, well made but practical. She braided her damp hair and pinned it up, then made her way to the house. The kitchen was warm and smelled of bacon and biscuits. An older man with a grizzled beard stood at the stove. You'd be Miss Colleen, he said without turning. Sit, food's ready. She sat at the long wooden table, and he set a loaded plate before her. Thank you, Mr. Just Cookie. Been cooking for this ranch near 20 years. He poured her fresh coffee. You're the girl used to live in the old Colleen place. Yes. Lucas is out with the hands, but he left something for you. Cookie pulled a leather folder from a shelf and set it beside her plate. Sarah opened it and found the deed to her father's house. Her hands trembled as she read the familiar description of the property. I don't understand. Note there, too, Cookie said. She unfolded the paper beneath the deed. Lucas's bold handwriting filled the page. Asterisk Sarah. The house is yours if you want it. No payment needed, consider it settling an old debt. But I have a different proposition. The ranch needs someone who can handle accounts and correspondence. The job comes with room and board, fair wages. You could live in your father's house. Fix it up as you like. If you're staying, be here at sunset. If not, the road to town is clear. L***. Sarah read it twice, then set it down with shaking hands. Known that boy since he was knee-high, Cookie said, refilling her coffee. His daddy was hard as granite, beat the feeling out of him young, or tried to, but some things run too deep to kill off entirely. I can't. Eat your breakfast, Cookie said gently. Then decide, but I'll tell you this pride makes a cold bedfellow, and this winter's going to be a long one. Sarah picked up her fork mechanically. Through the window, she could see riders moving cattle in the distance. One sat his horse with a particular grace that made her heart clench. She'd come here for the house. He was giving it to her free and clear. She could take it and go, try to make a life in town where everyone would whisper behind her back. Or she could stay, work for the man who'd put her in a barn, who'd watched her world crumble, who'd kissed her once beneath a summer moon and made her believe in forever. The food turned to ash in her mouth. He's not the boy you knew, Cookie said quietly. Life's made him harder, but he's fair, and he keeps his word. That's more than most. I know. Do you? Because from where I sit, you both got some fool notion about the past that's keeping you from seeing what's in front of you. Sarah looked up sharply, but Cookie was already turning back to his stove. Conversation clearly over. She finished her breakfast in silence, then walked back outside. The sun was climbing higher, warming the air. The storm had passed, leaving the world white and clean, like a fresh page waiting to be written. The deed lay heavy in her pocket. Freedom, if she wanted it, or chains of a different kind, if she stayed. But as she stood there in the morning light, watching the ranch come alive with the day's work, Sarah realized the truth she'd been running from for 4 years. She'd never really left at all. The barn was quiet except for the occasional stamp of hooves and the whisper of hay as horses shifted in their stalls. Sarah had returned after breakfast, unable to stay in the house where everything smelled of leather and Lucas. She needed to think, and the barn's familiar sense of grain and wood helped clear her mind. She'd spread her few belongings on the clean straw, the canvas bag looking pathetically small in the empty stall. 4 years of her life reduced to this. The deed to her father's house lay on top, its official seals mocking her. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Another storm building, though the morning had been clear. Sarah shivered, pulling Lucas's mother's shawl tighter around her shoulders. The blue calico dress fit well enough, but it felt strange wearing another woman's clothes, especially hers. Planning to stay out here all day? She didn't turn at Lucas's voice. I'm thinking... Think inside. Storm's coming. I've weathered storms before. Not like this one. He entered the stall, and she was acutely aware of how the space shrank with him in it. Weather's turning bad. Could be snowed in for days. Then I should leave now. That what you want? Sarah finally looked at him. He'd been working dust on his boots, his shirt damp with sweat despite the cold. There was a weariness in his eyes she didn't remember from before. I don't know what I want, she admitted. That's a start. Better than coming here certain of everything and knowing nothing. Like you know so much. He sat on a hay bale, his movements careful. She noticed him favoring his left side. I know you spent 4 years in Boston telling yourself stories about what happened here. I know you think I betrayed you somehow, and I know you're too proud to ask what really happened. You just told me this morning, my father. That's not what I mean. He pulled a piece of straw from the bale, twirling it between his fingers. The night before you left. Remember? Sarah's breath caught. Of course she remembered. The church social, dancing until her feet hurt. Lucas spinning her around and around until she was dizzy with laughter. Then walking her home under the stars, stopping by the old oak tree. That has nothing to do with him. Doesn't it? He looked up at her. You kissed me that night like the world was ending. Then next morning, you were gone. No word, no letter, nothing. My father had just lost everything. What was I supposed to do? Talk to me. Let me help. Help, Sarah laughed bitterly. Your family owned half the valley. Mine owned nothing but debt. What could you have done? Married you. The words hung between them like lightning about to strike. Sarah sank down onto the straw, her legs suddenly unsteady. You were 19, she whispered. Your father would have killed me, probably disowned me. Certainly. Lucas shrugged. Would have been worth it? Don't say that. Why not? It's true. He tossed the straw aside. I looked for you. Rode to every town within 50 miles. Nobody had seen you. I took the stage to Denver, then the train east. Smart. I never thought to check that far. He rubbed his side absently. By the time I got back, my father had arrangements made. Rebecca Dane. You remember her? Sarah's stomach twisted. Rebecca Blonde. Beautiful. Daughter of the richest rancher in the neighboring county. I remember. We were engaged 6 months. Then she found someone she liked better in San Francisco. His smile was wry. Seems I wasn't exciting enough. Too set in my ways. She said, I'm sorry. Don't be. She did me a favor. He stood, pacing to the stall entrance. My father died the next year. Heart gave out. Left me the ranch and a mountain of problems. I've spent 3 years trying to fix what he broke, make something worthwhile out of this place. Thunder crashed closer now, and the first spatters of rain hit the barn roof. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked. "Because you need to know. Because you think I stood by and did nothing when your family fell apart. Because you've been carrying this anger for 4 years. And it's eating you alive." "I'm not angry." He turned to look at her. "No. Then why are your hands clenched into fists?" She looked down, surprised to find he was right. Slowly, she relaxed her fingers. "I offered to buy your father's house to help," Lucas continued. "When that didn't work, I tried to give him a job here. He threw it back in my face. Said he wouldn't take charity from a wren. The bank foreclosed before I could figure out another way. And then you bought it. To keep it safe, in case you ever came back." He laughed, short and sharp. "Cookie thinks I'm a fool. Maybe I am." The rain was falling harder now, drumming on the roof. Sarah watched it sheet down past the open barn doors, turning the world gray. "The night in the barn," she said slowly. "When I asked you not to keep your distance, it's not because I don't—" She stopped, searching for words. "I know. Do you—" Lucas came back into the stall, kneeling in the straw in front of her. This close, she could see new lines around his eyes, a small scar on his chin she didn't remember. "You're scared," he said simply. "So am I." "You scared of what?" "That you'll leave again. That I'll wake up tomorrow and you'll be gone. And I'll spend another 4 years wondering if you're alive or dead, or married to some Boston gentleman who doesn't know you snore when you're really tired." "I don't snore." "You do. Heard you last night." His smile was gentle now, the first real warmth she'd seen from him. Gentle little sounds, like a cat purring. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You were listening to me sleep." "Checking you hadn't frozen to death. This barn's warm enough, but that storm was fierce." They were close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. It would be so easy to lean forward, to close the distance between them. But the wounds were still too fresh, the fear too strong. "I need time," she whispered. "I know." "I can't just pick up where we left off." "I'm not asking you to." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Take the job. Live in your father's house. Figure out what you want. I'll keep my distance until you decide. And if I decide to leave—" His hand dropped. "Then you leave. I won't stop you this time." Lightning flashed, illuminating the barn in stark white. In that moment, she saw him clearly, not the boy she'd loved, not the cold stranger he'd seemed this morning, but a man who'd been shaped by loss just as she had. "All right," she said. "I'll take the job." Relief flickered across his face before he controlled it. "Good. Cookie will show you to the house tomorrow. Tonight." He glanced at the storm. "Tonight you'd better stay in the main house. This barn won't be safe if the lightning gets closer. People will talk. Let them. They're talking anyway." He stood, offering her his hand. "Come on, before we both get struck." Sarah looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Taking it felt like stepping off a cliff, not knowing if she'd fly or fall. But staying in the barn while the storm raged felt like cowardice. She placed her hand in his. His fingers were calloused, strong, familiar despite the years. He pulled her to her feet, and for a moment they stood there, hands clasped, neither moving. "Sarah," he said softly. "Don't—" She pulled her hand free. "You promised to keep your distance." "Starting tomorrow," he said. "Tonight doesn't count." But he stepped back anyway, letting her gather her things. They ran through the rain to the house, arriving soaked and breathless. Cookie took one look at them and pointed to the fire. "Sit, both of you. I'll bring towels and hot coffee." Sarah sat in the same chair as this morning, Lucas taking the one across from her. The fire crackled between them, steam rising from their wet clothes. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For keeping the house, for the job, for... She gestured helplessly. Everything. I didn't do it for thanks. I know. Cookie returned with towels and coffee, muttering about fools who stood around in thunderstorms. Sarah wrapped herself in the warm cloth, sipping the hot liquid gratefully. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, by the fire, with the familiar presence of Lucas across from her, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in 4 years. She felt like she might be home. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard as Sarah made her way to the kitchen. She'd been working at the Wren Ranch for 2 weeks now, and a routine had settled over her days. Rise before dawn, help Cookie with breakfast for the hands, then spend the morning in Lucas's study managing accounts and correspondence. Afternoons were for mending saddles and work clothes, a skill the men had quickly come to appreciate. "Morning, Miss Sarah," called Tom Garrett, tipping his hat as he headed to the stables. The other hands had started doing the same small gestures of respect she hadn't expected. "Morning, Tom. How's that shoulder?" "Better since you fixed that salve for it. Like magic." "It was." Sarah smiled, continuing to the kitchen where Cookie already had coffee brewing. She'd learned that arriving before he did earned her grudging approval, and this morning she'd beaten him by 10 minutes. "You're up early," Cookie observed, handing her a cup without being asked. "Wanted to get the biscuits started. The men worked late fixing that fence section." Cookie's grunt could have meant anything, but she caught the pleased glint in his eye. The kitchen filled with warmth as they worked in companionable silence. Sarah had learned Cookie's rhythms when he wanted help, when he preferred to work alone, when he was willing to share stories of the ranch's early days. "Boss was out late too," Cookie mentioned casually, slicing bacon. "Checking the herd in the north pasture. That wolf's been getting bolder." Sarah's hands stilled on the biscuit dough. Lucas had been keeping his promise, maintaining careful distance. They spoke only of ranch business, and he made sure someone else was always present. But she was aware of him constantly, the sound of his boots on the porch, his low voice giving orders, the way he still favored his left side on cold mornings. "He should be careful," she said, resuming her kneading. "Man's got too much weight on his shoulders. Ranch is doing better, but there's still debt from his father's time. And now, with winter coming hard..." Cookie trailed off, shaking his head. The hands filed in for breakfast, filling the kitchen with noise and the smell of wet wool. Sarah moved among them, pouring coffee and setting out plates. She'd worried they'd resent her presence, but hunger apparently trumped old grudges. "Miss Sarah," Ben Hawkins spoke up. "That letter you wrote to the bank in Denver. It worked. They're giving us another month on the loan payment." A murmur of approval ran through the room. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I simply explained the situation clearly. Mr. Wren's reputation did the rest." "Still, that's the first time them bankers ever listened to reason," said another hand. Lucas entered then, and the easy chatter died. He looked tired, Sarah thought, noting the shadows under his eyes. His gaze found hers briefly before sliding away. "Ben, take 4 men and check the eastern boundary. I want to know if that fence will hold when the real storms hit. Tom, you and the others start moving the cattle closer in. That wolf took a calf last night." The men murmured acknowledgement, finishing their meal quickly. Soon only Sarah, Cookie, and Lucas remained. "I'll need the supply lists for town," Lucas said, still not looking directly at her. "We're running low on several things." "They're on your desk," Sarah replied. "Along with the household accounts. We're under budget this month." "Good." He turned to leave, then paused. "There's correspondence from the Cattle Association. Annual meetings coming up. You'll need to write the response." "Of course." He left without another word. Cookie snorted. "You two are about as natural as a 3-legged horse. How long you planning to keep this up?" "Keep what up?" Sarah busied herself clearing plates. This foolishness, dancing around each other like strangers when anyone with eyes can see. Cookie! Her voice was sharper than intended. Please don't. The old man studied her for a moment, then nodded. Your business. But winters are long out here. Cold, too, when you're alone. Sarah spent the morning in the study, a small room off the main hallway that smelled of leather and pipe tobacco. Lucas's father had used it, and before him, his grandfather. 3 generations of Wren history surrounded her in ledgers and land deeds. She was deep in correspondence when a shadow fell across the desk. Lucas stood in the doorway, a bandage visible through a tear in his shirt sleeve. What happened? The words were out before she could stop them. It's nothing. Caught it on wire. But she could see blood seeping through the white cloth. Without thinking, she stood and moved toward him. Let me see. I said it's nothing. And I can see it's not. She reached for his arm, and he let her, though she felt the tension in his muscles. Carefully, she peeled back the bandage. The cut was deep, still bleeding. This needs proper cleaning and stitches. Cookie can. Cookie's in town getting supplies. Sit. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he sank into the chair she'd vacated, extending his arm. Sarah gathered what she needed: clean cloth, carbolic solution, needle and thread from her sewing basket. This will hurt, she warned, dabbing at the wound. Can't be worse than when I broke it. When was that? She kept her voice steady, focusing on cleaning the cut rather than the warmth of his skin under her fingers. 3 years ago. Horse spooked during a storm. Threw me into a fence post. Is that why you favor your left side sometimes? He looked at her sharply. You noticed. I notice a lot of things. She threaded the needle, grateful for the excuse to break eye contact. Hold still. He didn't flinch as she made the first stitch, though his jaw tightened. They were close enough that she could smell the soap he used, see the fine lines the sun had etched around his eyes. Sarah. Don't talk, you'll move. But he caught her wrist gently with his free hand, stilling her. Thank you. It's just a few stitches. Not for this, for everything. The men respect you. Cookie actually smiles sometimes. The ranch is running smoother than it has in years. She looked down at where his fingers circled her wrist. His thumb moved slightly, brushing her pulse point, and her breath caught. Lucas. I know, I'm keeping my distance, but he didn't let go. This doesn't feel like distance. No, he agreed. It doesn't. They stayed frozen for a moment. His hand on her wrist, her hand on his arm. Then voices approached from outside ranch hands returning for the midday meal. Lucas released her, and she stepped back quickly, returning to the stitching with unsteady hands. By the time the men entered, she was tying off the thread, everything properly distant and professional again, but her wrist still burned where he'd touched it. That afternoon, Sarah walked to her father's house for the first time since returning. It sat at the edge of the ranch property, small and weathered but sturdy. The key Lucas had given her turned easily in the lock. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight. The furniture was gone sold to pay debts, she supposed, but the bones of the house remained. She moved through the empty rooms, memories flooding back, her mother singing in the kitchen, her father laughing at some joke, back before the drinking got bad, herself at 10, 12, 15, dreaming of the future. The back door stuck, but she forced it open and stepped onto the small porch. The view stretched out over grassland to the mountains beyond. Her mother had loved this view. Thought I might find you here. She turned to find Lucas in the doorway. Are you following me? Yes. The simple honesty of it surprised her. I wanted to make sure you were all right. First time back can be hard. It's emptier than I expected. I can have some furniture brought from the ranch. We have pieces in storage. No. She wrapped her arms around herself. Not yet. I need to make it mine first. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. He joined her on the porch, careful to leave space between them. I did the same with the ranch house after my father died. Took months before it felt like home instead of his domain. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun lower toward the mountains. Sarah was acutely aware of his presence, the careful distance he maintained. I should check that Wolf didn't circle back, he said eventually. Be careful. He paused at the door. Sarah, this arrangement, me keeping my distance, it's not what I want. But I meant what I said. It's your choice, always. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the empty house and a heart that felt too full. She'd thought coming back would be about reclaiming the past, but standing here, in this house that was both familiar and strange, she realized she was building something new. The question was whether she was brave enough to see it through. The afternoon sun slanted through the study windows as Sarah worked on the monthly accounts. She'd been at the ranch for nearly a month now, and the rhythm of the place had become as familiar as breathing. The scratch of her pen on paper was the only sound until boots approached down the hallway, not Lucas's measured tread. But something hurried, limping. Ben Hawkins appeared in the doorway, his face tight with pain. Miss Sarah, I'm sorry to bother you, but... She was already rising, noting the way he cradled his left hand against his chest. What happened? Fool horse kicked when I was checking his hooves. Think it might be broken. Let me see. She guided him to a chair, gently examining the already swelling fingers. Can you move them? He tried, wincing, a little. Likely not broken then, but badly sprained. We need to wrap it and get cold water on it. She moved efficiently, gathering supplies from the cabinet she'd stocked for such occasions. Where's Mr. Wren? Rode out to the Johnson place. They're having trouble with raiders stealing cattle. Sarah frowned as she began wrapping Ben's hand. Lucas had been gone more often lately, dealing with problems throughout the valley. The Cattle Association was pressuring smaller ranchers to sell, and Lucas spent his time mediating, trying to hold the community together. There, she said, securing the bandage. Keep it elevated when you can. I'll make a poultice tonight that should help with the swelling. You're a wonder, Miss Sarah. Don't know what we did before you came. Cookie managed well enough, I'm sure. Ben snorted. Cookie's idea of medicine is whiskey for everything, inside or out. Despite herself, Sarah smiled. Well, there's something to be said for that approach, too. The young hand left with profuse thanks, and Sarah returned to her work. But she couldn't concentrate. Something felt off today, a tension in the air like the moments before a storm. Her unease proved justified when Tom Garrett burst through the door an hour later. Miss Sarah, you need to come quick. There's been an accident. Her heart stopped. Lucas. He's all right, mostly. But there was a fight at the Johnson place. Sheriff's there now. Sarah was already reaching for her shawl. What kind of fight? Carter's men were trying to force Johnson off his land. Mr. Wren stepped in. Tom's face was grim. Took 3 of them to bring him down. The ride to the Johnson ranch was the longest of Sarah's life. Tom filled her in on the way how the Carter ranch had been pressuring smaller operations to sell, how Lucas had been standing between them and the families they threatened. Today it had come to violence. They found a crowd gathered in the Johnsons' yard. Sheriff Morrison, Jake's older brother, stood in the center, trying to restore order. Lucas sat on the porch steps, a bloody cloth pressed to his forehead. Sarah's knees nearly buckled with relief at seeing him upright. What do you think you're doing here? The sharp voice belonged to Rebecca Dane Rebecca Carter now. Sarah reminded herself. The blonde woman stood near the porch, her expensive dress out of place in the dusty yard. I work for Mr. Wren, Sarah said evenly. I heard he was injured. Work for him. Rebecca's laugh was crystalline and cutting. Is that what they're calling it now? Rebecca. Lucas's voice was tired but firm. Enough. Sarah pushed past the other woman and knelt beside Lucas. The cut on his forehead was bleeding freely. and his knuckles were split. What happened? Difference of opinion, he said dryly. Mr. Wren was defending my family. Mrs. Johnson interjected, her voice shaking. Those men came here, threatening to burn us out if we didn't sell. Lucas stopped them by starting a brawl. Sheriff Morrison said, I'll need statements from everyone. You'll get them, Lucas said. But you might want to ask Carter why his men were here with torches in broad daylight. Sarah focused on cleaning Lucas's wounds while the sheriff conducted his investigation. She was aware of Rebecca watching, of the whispers spreading through the crowd, but she kept her attention on her task. You're still too reckless, she murmured, dabbing at the cut. Some things are worth fighting for. His gray eyes found hers. Always have been. Heat flooded her cheeks, but she kept working. This needs stitches too. You're making a habit of getting hurt. Maybe I like having you patch me up. Lucas. The warning in her voice made him smile slightly. I know, distance. But his hand covered hers briefly where it rested on his shoulder. Thank you for coming. Rebecca's voice cut through the moment. How touching, the prodigal daughter playing nurse. She moved closer, her perfume cloying in the afternoon heat. Tell me, Sarah, does he pay extra for the medical care? Or is that included in your arrangement? Sarah stood slowly, turning to face the other woman. I'm sorry your marriage isn't happy enough to keep you occupied, Rebecca, but perhaps you should focus on your own household rather than speculating about others. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rebecca's face flushed ugly red. You little... Mrs. Carter, Sheriff Morrison intervened. I'll need your husband's statement about why his men were here. Perhaps you could fetch him. Rebecca left in a swirl of skirts and indignation. Sarah found the entire crowd staring at her. Some faces showed disapproval, others a kind of surprised respect. Well, Lucas said, a note of admiration in his voice. That was something. Sarah helped him stand. You need proper medical attention. Can you ride? I've ridden with worse. Which was probably true, but didn't make her feel better. They made their way back to the ranch slowly, Lucas swaying occasionally in the saddle. Sarah rode close, ready to steady him if needed. Cookie met them at the door, taking in Lucas's condition with one glance. What fool thing did you do now? Prevented a family from losing their home, Lucas said. Course you did. Cookie helped him inside. Can't mind your own business. Never could. Miss Sarah, I'll get water heating. They worked together to clean and stitch Lucas's wounds. He bore it stoically, though Sarah noticed the white lines around his mouth. When they finished, Cookie prescribed his universal remedy, a large glass of whiskey, and left them alone by the fire. You shouldn't have confronted Rebecca, Lucas said after a long silence. She insulted me. And you? She's not wrong, though people are talking. Sarah set down her sewing. She'd been mending his torn shirt. Let them talk. It could make things difficult for you in town. Things have always been difficult for me in town. She met his eyes steadily. I'm not a 17-year-old girl anymore. Lucas, I don't run from whispers. He studied her for a long moment. No, you don't. You've grown stronger. I had to. I'm sorry for that. Sorry you had to leave. Sorry I couldn't... Stop. She moved to sit beside him on the sofa. We can't change the past, and maybe we needed that time to become who we are now. Who are we now? It was a fair question. Sarah considered it. Watching the fire dance. You're a man who fights for what's right, even when it costs you. Who keeps his promises even when it hurts. Who builds instead of tears down. And you, I'm still figuring that out. She smiled slightly. But I know I'm not running anymore. Lucas's hand found hers where it lay between them. Good. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the fire burn low. Outside, dusk was falling, painting the sky purple and gold. Sarah knew she should go, maintain the careful distance they'd agreed on. But Lucas's thumb was tracing gentle circles on her palm, and she found she couldn't move. "Sarah," he said quietly, "that day in the Johnsons' yard, when you stood up to Rebecca, I wanted to kiss you right there in front of everyone." Her breath caught. That would have been inadvisable. "Most of what I want when it comes to you is inadvisable." His voice was rough with exhaustion and something else. "But I'm trying to do right by you this time." "I know." She squeezed his hand gently. "That's why I'm still here." A sound from the kitchen broke the spell, Cookie returning. Sarah stood reluctantly. "I should go. You need rest." "Stay for dinner at least. Cookie's making stew." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but then I really do need to check on the house. I've started cleaning, getting it ready." "Ready for what?" She paused at the door. "I'm not sure yet, but I'll know when I get there." Lucas smiled then, the first real smile she'd seen from him all day. "Still stubborn as that mule. And you're still reckless as a green bronc rider. Quite a pair, aren't we?" Sarah felt an answering smile tug at her lips. "Yes," she said softly. "I suppose we are." The Sunday service at Silver Hollow's small church was nearly over when Sarah heard the whispers start. She kept her eyes forward, focused on Reverend Thompson's sermon about forgiveness, but she could feel the weight of stares from the congregation. "I'm living in sin out at that ranch. Her poor father must be turning in his grave. Shameless, just like before." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap, but she kept her expression serene. She'd known this would happen eventually. For weeks, she'd managed to avoid town on Sundays. But today, Lucas had needed her to deliver important documents to the bank president, who only came to town for church. The whispers grew louder as the service ended. Sarah stood, intending to slip out quickly, but found her path blocked by Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Hartley, two of the town's most dedicated gossips. "Sarah Colleen, Mrs." Patterson said, her voice carrying across the church. "We're all so concerned about your situation." "My situation." Sarah kept her tone polite but cool. "Living out at the Wren Ranch, unchaperoned. It's not proper, dear." "I live in my father's house, Mrs. Patterson, and I work for Mr. Wren, managing his accounts and correspondence. Everything is entirely proper." "Mrs." Hartley leaned in, her voice dropping to a stage whisper everyone could hear. "But people have seen you coming and going at all hours, tending to him personally when he was injured. As any Christian woman would help someone in need." Sarah replied, "Christian?" Rebecca Carter's voice cut through the church like a blade. She stood near the altar in a dress of deep blue silk, every inch the wealthy rancher's wife. "Is that what you call your behavior?" The church fell silent. Even Reverend Thompson seemed frozen in place. Sarah turned slowly to face Rebecca. "I beg your pardon." "You heard me." Rebecca moved closer, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "Throwing yourself at Lucas the moment you returned, using your father's debts as an excuse to worm your way into his household." "That's enough." The deep voice came from the church entrance. Lucas stood there, hat in hand, his expression thunderous. "Mrs. Carter, I believe your husband is looking for you." "Lucas." Rebecca's voice softened, became almost pleading. "I'm only trying to protect your reputation. Surely you can see what she's doing." "What I see," Lucas said, walking down the aisle, "is a woman who works harder than any two men, who's helped save 3 families from losing their homes through her letters to the banks, and who asks for nothing but fair wages for honest work." He stopped beside Sarah, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his warmth. The gesture was clear he stood with her. "Furthermore," he continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the church, "Miss Colleen has conducted herself with nothing but propriety and dignity, despite the whispers and speculation of people who should know better." Reverend Thompson finally found his voice. Perhaps we should all remember the sermon about casting the first stone. Don't quote scripture at me, Rebecca snapped. Not when this saloon girl's daughter is parading around like... The crack of Sarah's palm against Rebecca's cheek echoed through the church. Rebecca stumbled back, hand to her face, eyes wide with shock. My mother was a schoolteacher, Sarah said quietly. She came to this town to educate children, met my father, and chose to stay. She was worth 10 of you. Rebecca Dane Carter, and I'll not stand here and let you soil her memory. You struck me, Rebecca gasped. Everyone saw Sheriff Morrison. I want her arrested. But the sheriff, standing near the back, made no move to act. Didn't see anything. Mrs. Carter. Must have been a trick of the light. A murmur ran through the congregation, not of condemnation, but something that sounded almost like approval. This isn't over, Rebecca hissed. My husband will hear about this. The whole valley will know what kind of woman you really are. They already know. Sarah said, I'm James Colleen's daughter. I'm not ashamed of that anymore. Rebecca fled the church, her silk dress rustling with indignation. In her wake, the congregation seemed to exhale collectively. Mrs. Johnson, the woman whose family Lucas had defended, stepped forward. Miss Colleen, would you join us for Sunday dinner? My husband and I would be honored. Others nodded, murmuring invitations and words of support. Not everyone. Some still looked disapproving, but more than Sarah had expected. That's kind of you, she said, but I need to return to the ranch. There's work to be done. She walked out with her head high, Lucas beside her. They didn't speak until they were outside, away from curious ears. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. He helped her into the wagon he'd brought. I should have done it sooner. Should have made it clear that you're under my protection. I don't need protection. Lucas? No, he agreed, climbing up beside her. That slap proved that well enough. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Despite everything, Sarah felt a smile tug at her lips. Too late for that. You already put me in a barn. Remember? Something I'll regret to my dying day. But he was smiling too. That was quite a scene. I shouldn't have hit her. Probably not. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy seeing it. He glanced at her. Your mother would have been proud. Sarah's throat tightened. You think so? I know so. She had the same fire in her, same way of standing up to bullies. He guided the horses onto the main road. I remember when she faced down 3 cowboys who were hassling the Mexican families, told them they'd learn manners or learn to read and write their own letters, because she'd not help ignorant fools. I'd forgotten that story. Sarah smiled at the memory. Father was terrified they'd retaliate. But they didn't. They slunk off like scolded dogs. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Your father loved her fiercely. You know, before the drinking got bad, he used to say she was too good for a gambler like him. Maybe she was. No. Lucas shook his head. She chose him. Eyes wide open. That's not settling, that's love. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Sarah watched the familiar landscape roll by, feeling something shift inside her. The confrontation in the church, instead of leaving her shaken, had somehow freed her. She'd faced the worst of the gossip, stood up to it, and survived. Lucas, she said as they neared the ranch. I don't want to hide anymore. He glanced at her, eyebrow raised, meaning, I've been keeping to the edges, trying not to be seen too much with you, worried about what people would think, but they're thinking it anyway. Sarah, I'm not saying I still need time, to trust, to heal, but I don't want to pretend we're strangers anymore. She took a breath. Would you have dinner with me tonight at my father's house? I've finally got it cleaned, and Cookie taught me his stew recipe. Lucas was quiet so long she feared she'd overstepped. Then he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. I'd like that. They pulled up at the ranch house. Several of the hands were gathered on the porch, and from their expressions, news of the church confrontation had already reached them. "Miss Sarah!" Ben called out. "Is it true you slapped Mrs. Carter?" "Ben," Lucas warned. "It's all right." Sarah climbed down from the wagon. "Yes, I slapped her for insulting your ma." "Yes." A cheer went up from the men. Tom Garrett whistled appreciatively. "About time someone took that woman down a peg." "Enough," Lucas said. But Sarah could see he was fighting a smile. "Don't you all have work to do?" The men scattered, but not before several tipped their hats to Sarah with newfound respect. Cookie appeared in the doorway. "Heard you caused quite a stir at church." "News travels fast." "Always does. Also heard you invited someone for dinner." His eyes twinkled. "Need any help with that stew?" "I think I can manage," Sarah said, "but thank you." She spent the afternoon preparing, trying not to think too hard about what this meant. It was just dinner. Two old friends sharing a meal. Nothing more. But when Lucas knocked at her door that evening, cleaned up and wearing his good shirt, holding a small bunch of wildflowers, Sarah knew she was fooling herself. This was something more, something that could hurt them both if it went wrong. But as she took the flowers and invited him in, Sarah found she didn't care. She'd spent 4 years being careful, being safe, being alone. Maybe it was time to be brave instead. The evening started well enough. Lucas complimented the stew. They talked easily about ranch business, and for a while it felt like they'd recaptured something from years ago. But as darkness fell and the lamp cast shadows on the walls, the weight of unspoken words grew heavy between them. Sarah poured coffee with hands that trembled slightly. "The Johnsons sent word they're grateful for what you did." "Just being neighborly." Lucas accepted the cup, his fingers brushing hers. It was more than that. She sat across from him at the small table she'd bought with her first wages. "You risked your reputation, your standing with the Cattle Association. Some things matter more than standing." They lapsed into silence. Outside, wind rattled the windows, another storm building. Sarah wrapped her shawl tighter, though the house was warm enough. "Talk to me," Lucas said suddenly. "About Boston, about those 4 years." "What do you want to know?" "Everything, anything. I spent so long wondering." He trailed off, staring into his coffee. Sarah considered. "I worked for Mrs. Whitmore first. She ran a dress shop on Beacon Street, paid almost nothing, but she let me sleep in the back room. Must have been hard." It was lonely. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "The other girls thought I was strange, too serious, too Western. They'd go to dances on Saturday nights while I stayed in, saving every penny. No suitors." His voice was carefully neutral. "A few tried. There was a clerk at the bank, Mr. Daniels. He was kind, steady. Brought me flowers every Sunday for 3 months." Lucas's knuckles whitened around his cup. And I couldn't do it. Couldn't pretend to feel something I didn't. Couldn't kiss him without thinking." She stopped abruptly. "Without thinking what?" Sarah stood, moving to the window. Lightning flickered in the distance. "You know what?" She heard his chair scrape back, felt him come to stand behind her. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Do you know what I thought about?" His voice was low, rough. "Every night for 4 years I thought about you in some city parlor, laughing at stories about the backward ranch boy who thought he could keep you. Lucas, I thought about you married to some shopkeeper or banker, happy, safe, better off without me." His laugh was bitter. "Cookie says I near worked myself to death that first year, easier than thinking." Sarah turned to face him. "I wrote you letters, 100 of them, maybe more. Never sent a single one." "Why not?" "Because what could I say that I was sorry, that leaving you was like tearing out my own heart, that I—" Her voice broke. "Sarah." He reached for her, then caught himself. "Don't, not if you don't mean it." That's just it, she whispered. I do mean it. That's what terrifies me. Thunder crashed overhead, and the skies opened. Rain hammered against the windows, driven sideways by the wind. The lamplight flickered as the house shook. I should go, Lucas said. Storm's getting bad. No? The word came out sharper than intended. Sarah softened her tone. I mean, it's not safe. You could stay. She gestured helplessly. The barn here is sound. The barn, despite everything. His mouth quirked. That's becoming a pattern with us. I didn't mean... I know what you meant. He moved to the door. I'll be fine. Ridden through worse. But when he opened the door, the wind nearly tore it from his hands. Rain slashed in, soaking them both in seconds. Lucas forced it closed again, breathing hard. All right, he admitted. Maybe not. Sarah lit another lamp with shaking hands. I'll get blankets. She fled to the small bedroom, pressing her palms against her burning cheeks. This was ridiculous. They were adults, not children. They could weather a storm in the same house without... A crash from outside made her jump. Through the bedroom window, she saw a piece of fence sailing past. This wasn't just a storm, it was turning dangerous. She gathered blankets and returned to find Lucas securing the shutters. His shirt was soaked through, clinging to his shoulders. Here. She held out the blankets, trying not to stare. Thanks. He took them, their fingers tangling briefly. Sarah, Another crash, closer this time. The whole house shuddered. Root cellar, they said in unison. They ran for it, Lucas grabbing the lamp. The cellar door was around back, already straining against the wind. Together they wrenched it open and half fell down the wooden steps. The cellar was small, musty but solid. Above them, the storm raged like a living thing. Something heavy hit the house, a tree branch, maybe, or part of someone's roof. Well, Lucas said, setting the lamp on a shelf. This brings back memories. Sarah laughed, despite herself. They'd hidden in this very cellar once before, during a storm when they were 15. Her father had been passed out drunk upstairs, and Lucas had come to check on them. You held my hand all night, she remembered. Told me stories about your grandfather's adventures to keep me from being scared. You weren't scared. You were never scared of storms. I was scared of other things. They were standing close in the small space. No room to maintain careful distance. Lucas's hair dripped onto his collar. Without thinking, Sarah reached up to push a wet strand back from his forehead. He caught her wrist gently. Please don't touch me unless you mean it. I told you, I do mean it. Do you, because I can't do this halfway? Sarah, I can't be your friend. Can't pretend I don't want... He released her wrist, running his hand through his hair. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But every time you smile, every time you look at me like you're looking now. How am I looking at you? Like you did that night before you left. Like you want to run toward me and away from me at the same time. The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows. Above them, something else crashed into the house. Sarah barely noticed. I'm tired of running, she said softly. So stay. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. Stay with me, not just through the storm. Always. Lucas, I love you. The words came out raw, desperate. I've loved you since we were 15 years old. I loved you when you left, loved you every day you were gone. Love you now even though it's tearing me apart. So please, Sarah, please either let me kiss you or tell me to leave, because I can't. She rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, cutting off his words. For a moment, he froze, as if afraid to believe it was real. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him, and he was kissing her back with 4 years of longing poured into it. He tasted like coffee and desperation. His hands tangled in her hair, pins scattering. She clutched his shoulders, dizzy with the feel of him, solid and real and here. when they broke apart, both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against hers. "Sarah." "No." She pressed fingers to his lips. "Don't ask if I'm sure. Don't ask what this means. Can we just have tonight without questions or promises or plans? Is that what you want, just tonight?" She could lie. It would be kinder. Maybe, but she'd done enough running. "No," she whispered. "But I'm scared. Lucas, I'm scared of needing you again. I'm scared of losing myself. I'm scared." "I know." He pulled her close, tucking her head under his chin. "I'm scared too, but maybe we can be scared together." The storm howled above them, but here in the cellar, in the circle of his arms, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in 4 years. She felt safe. They stayed there through the night, talking in whispers, stealing kisses, relearning each other. When dawn finally came and the storm passed, they emerged to find branches scattered everywhere and part of the porch railing gone. "I should check the ranch," Lucas said, but he made no move to leave. "Yes." They stood there, disheveled and exhausted, hands linked. "Tonight changes things," he said. "I know. The whole town will talk." "They already are." He brought their joined hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I meant what I said. I love you. Sarah Colleen, that's not going to change." "I know that too." She squeezed his hand. "I just need time." "I know. I'll wait." He smiled. That crooked smile she'd fallen in love with at 15. "I'm good at waiting. Had 4 years of practice." He left her standing there in the storm's aftermath, surrounded by debris but feeling strangely whole. She pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Time. He'd give her time. The question was how much time she'd need before she could say the words back, the words that had been locked in her heart for 4 long years, waiting for her to be brave enough to set them free. The morning after the storm. Sarah stood in the doorway of her father's house, watching Lucas and his men work to clear debris from the ranch buildings. She'd made her decision in the pre-dawn hours, lying awake replaying their conversation in the cellar. The kiss, his declaration of love. She couldn't do it, couldn't risk her heart again, not when she'd finally found her footing. By noon, she'd packed her few belongings back into the canvas bag she'd arrived with. The house looked empty again, despite the furniture she'd added. She left the keys on the table along with a letter she'd rewritten 3 times. Cookie found her walking down the main road, bag in hand. "Where you think you're going, girl?" "Town. I'll catch the afternoon stage to Denver." The old man pulled his wagon alongside her, keeping pace with her determined stride. "Does he know?" "I left a letter." Cookie spat tobacco juice into the dust. "That's coward's way." "Maybe, but it's my way." She kept walking, eyes fixed ahead. "He loves you." "I know." "You love him." Sarah's step faltered slightly, but she recovered. "That's not enough." "Since when?" "Since love meant watching my father destroy himself and my mother along with him. Since love meant being 17 and alone with nowhere to go." Her voice cracked. "Since love meant spending 4 years wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life." Cookie pulled the wagon to a stop. "Get in." "I'm not going back." "Didn't say you were, but I'll not have you walking to town like some vagrant. Get in." She climbed up beside him reluctantly. They rode in silence for a while, the mountains distant and blue in the clear morning air. "You know what your problem is?" Cookie said eventually. "You think love's supposed to be safe? Think it's supposed to come with guarantees?" "I don't." "You do. You want Lucas to promise nothing bad will ever happen, that he'll never hurt you or disappoint you or die on you. But that's not love, girl. That's a business contract." Sarah gripped her bag tighter. "I can't go through it again." "Through what being left hell? You're the one doing the leaving this time." The truth of it stung. They reached the edge of town, and Sarah could see the stage depot ahead. A few people were already gathering, waiting for the afternoon coach. "He'll be all right," she said, more to herself than Cookie. "He was fine before I came back. He'll be fine again." Cookie snorted. "You really believe that?" Before she could answer, a commotion erupted near the Silver Dollar Saloon. Horses thundered down Main Street. Lucas on his bay gelding, followed by Ben and Tom. They pulled up sharp at the depot, and Lucas swung down before his horse had fully stopped. He was dusty, sweat-stained, and his eyes were wild. In his hand, he held her letter. "No," he said simply. Sarah lifted her chin. "You can't stop me." "I'm not trying to stop you." He stepped closer, and she saw the raw pain in his eyes. "I'm asking you not to go." "Lucas, you want to live in town, fine. You want me to court you proper, with chaperoned visits and Sunday dinners, fine. You want a year, 2 years, 10 years to decide, fine." His voice broke. "But please, don't leave. Not again." A crowd was gathering. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Hartley. Even Rebecca Carter had emerged from shops to watch. Sarah felt the weight of their stares, their whispers. "You're making a scene," she said quietly. "Good. Let them see. Let the whole town know that I love you. Sarah Colleen, that I've loved you since I was 19 years old, that I'll love you until they put me in the ground." He dropped to one knee right there in the dusty street. "Marry me." Gasps ran through the crowd. Sarah's bag slipped from nerveless fingers. "Lucas, get up!" "No. People are staring." "Let them." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn box. "This was my mother's. I've been carrying it for 2 months, waiting for the right moment. But maybe there's no right moment with us. Maybe there's just now." He opened the box. A simple gold band with a single small diamond caught the afternoon light. "I can't promise you an easy life," he continued. "Ranch work is hard, and there'll be bad years along with good. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, or that we won't argue, or that troubles won't come. But I can promise to love you through all of it, to stand beside you the way I should have 4 years ago, to never let you face anything alone again." Sarah's vision blurred. "I'm scared." "So am I. But Cookie's right, love's not supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be worth the risk." She looked around at the gathered crowd. Some faces showed disapproval, but more showed something else. Hope. Maybe. Or recognition of something real in a world full of pretense. "Mrs. Johnson stepped forward. "For heaven's sake, girl, say yes. Man like that doesn't come along twice." "She's right," called Tom Garrett. "Boss has been miserable for 4 years. Put him out of his misery." Even Sheriff Morrison nodded encouragingly. Sarah looked back at Lucas, still on one knee in the dust. This proud man who'd humbled himself before the whole town for her, who'd waited 4 years, who'd given her space when she needed it and fought for her when she needed that too. "You're absolutely certain?" she asked. "Never been more certain of anything in my life. Even though I'm difficult and stubborn and too independent for my own good. Especially then. Even though the whole town will gossip." "They're gossiping anyway. Might as well give them something good to talk about." Sarah took a shaky breath. Then, in front of God and Silver Hollow's entire population, she dropped to her knees in the dust beside him. "Yes," she said simply. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, and a few disapproving tuts from the more conservative matrons. Lucas's hands shook as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Really?" he asked, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "Really?" She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Though I still think you're reckless and impulsive and—" He kissed her, there in the middle of Main Street, cutting off her litany of his faults. The crowd cheered louder. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, Cookie stood over them shaking his head. "About damn time. Now get up off the ground. You're making spectacles of yourselves." Lucas helped her stand. then surprised her by scooping her up into his arms. "Come on, future missus. Wren, let's go home." "Lucas, put me down. People are staring." "Let them stare. I've got the woman I love in my arms and a wedding to plan. I don't care if the whole world watches." He carried her to his horse, setting her carefully in the saddle before swinging up behind her. The crowd parted to let them through, still buzzing with excitement. As they rode out of town, Sarah leaned back against his chest. "This doesn't solve everything. You know, I'm still scared, still stubborn, still perfect," he interrupted, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And still mine." "Yours," she agreed, surprising herself with how right it felt to say it. "But I want a long engagement. Time to know each other again properly." "How long?" 6 months at least. 3, 6, 4, and I'll throw in the biggest wedding this valley has ever seen. I don't want a big wedding." "Thank God, neither do I. Small wedding in 4 months." Sarah smiled, tilting her head to look up at him. "You're still impossible to argue with. And you're still stubborn as that mule. We're going to have an interesting marriage." "Yes," she said, watching the ranch come into view, their future spread out before them under the vast Montana sky. "I believe we are." Behind them, the town was already buzzing with the news. By nightfall, everyone in the valley would know that Sarah Colleen had finally come home for good, that Lucas Wren had won his bride, and that love-complicated, messy, terrifying love had won out over fear. It wasn't a perfect ending. There would still be challenges, still be moments of doubt, but as Lucas's arms tightened around her and his horse carried them home, Sarah realized that perfect wasn't what she wanted anyway. What she wanted was this man, this life, this chance to be brave enough to choose love over safety. And for the first time in 4 years, Sarah Colleen knew she was exactly where she belonged. 3 months had passed since Lucas's dramatic proposal, and Sarah had settled into a rhythm at the ranch that felt like home. The wedding was set for next month, and preparations were underway despite her insistence on keeping things simple. This morning, however, brought an unexpected disruption to their newfound peace. Sarah was in the study reviewing the ranch accounts when she heard the commotion outside: horses, raised voices, and Cookie's distinctive cursing. Through the window, she saw a man dismounting from a mud-splattered horse, his clothes shabby but his bearing somehow familiar. Her blood turned to ice. James Colleen had returned to Silver Hollow. She gripped the edge of the desk as Lucas's voice carried through the door, low and warning, unable to stay hidden. She stepped onto the porch. Her father looked older, grayer, his once handsome face lined with hard living, but his eyes were clearer than she'd seen them in years. "Sarah, girl," he said, his voice rough, "you look well." "Father." The word felt foreign on her tongue. "Why are you here?" "Heard my daughter was getting married. Thought I should be here for it." Lucas moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough for support. "Mr. Colleen, this is unexpected." James's laugh was bitter. "I bet it is. The drunk who lost everything, coming back to ruin his daughter's happiness again." "That's not—" Sarah began, but her father held up a hand. "It's true enough, or was." He reached into his coat, and Lucas tensed. But James only pulled out a worn leather wallet. "I've been working mining camps up north, saved every penny I didn't need for food." He held out a small pouch. "It's not much, but it's a start on paying back what I owe." "Father, I don't want—" "Please." His voice broke on the word. "Let me do this one thing right." Sarah took the pouch with trembling hands. It was heavier than expected, coins clinking inside. "How long have you been saving?" 2 years. Been sober that long, too." He met her eyes steadily. "I know it doesn't make up for anything. Doesn't bring your mother back or undo the hurt, but I needed to try." "Where are you staying?" Lucas asked. James shrugged. Figured I'd camp outside town. Don't want to cause trouble." "Nonsense," Sarah heard herself say. "You'll stay in the house. My house. Your old house." Both men looked at her in surprise. "Sarah," Lucas said carefully, "are you sure?" She wasn't. Part of her wanted to send her father away, to protect the life she'd built from the chaos he'd always brought. But another part, the part that remembered him teaching her to ride, carrying her on his shoulders, singing her to sleep, couldn't turn him away. "Just for a few days," she said, "until you figure out your plans." James nodded, understanding the boundaries in her offer. "Thank you, daughter. I'll not outstay my welcome." The next few days were tense. Sarah went about her work, hyper-aware of her father's presence on the ranch. The hands watched him warily, remembering the man who'd gambled away everything. But James kept to himself, working on repairs to the old house without being asked, staying clear of the saloon in town. On the third evening, Sarah found him sitting on the porch of her childhood home, watching the sunset. "May I?" she asked. He gestured to the space beside him. "It's your house." They sat in silence for a while, the awkwardness thick between them. "I remember when your mother and I first saw this place," he said eventually. "She said it had good bones, said we could build something here. You did, for a while." "Yeah, for a while." He rubbed his face. "I've got no excuses, Sarah, no grand explanation. I was weak, and I let that weakness destroy everything good in my life." "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back now?" "Because I heard you were happy. Heard Lucas Wren finally got the courage to propose, and you got the courage to accept." He smiled sadly. "Your mother always said you two were meant for each other. Said she could see it when you were just children." "She never told me that." "There's a lot she never told you, like how I tried to stop. How many times I promised her I'd quit the cards and the whiskey. How she stayed anyway, believing I could change." His voice grew thick. "She died, still believing it. I couldn't face that. Couldn't face you looking at me with her eyes, knowing I'd failed you both." Sarah felt tears threaten. "So you just left?" "It was that or drink myself to death in front of you." He looked at her directly. "I'm not asking forgiveness. I know better than that. But I wanted you to know that I've been trying to become the man she believed I could be. Even if it's too late." "It's not too late," Sarah said quietly. "It's different, and it can't be what it was, but it's not too late." They sat in silence again, more comfortable this time. In the distance, she could see Lucas in the corral, working with a young horse. He glanced their way occasionally, checking on her. "He's a good man," James said, following her gaze. "Better than I ever was." "He is. Loves you something fierce." "I know." "Do you love him?" Sarah considered the question. She'd been careful with those words, even after accepting his proposal. Some last protection around her heart. "Yes," she admitted. "I do." "Then tell him, don't wait, thinking there'll be time later. Your mother and I thought we had time." His voice cracked. "Tell him every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." That night, there was a knock at the ranch house door. Sarah opened it to find Sheriff Morrison looking grim. "Miss Colleen, I need to speak with your father." "What's this about?" Lucas appeared behind her. "The bank in Silver Hollow is putting the old Colleen place up for auction. Claims there's still outstanding debt from years back. Got paperwork saying it's happening tomorrow noon." Sarah's heart sank. "But Lucas paid off all the debts when he bought it." "That's what we thought. But seems there was another loan. Taken out just before your father left town. Bank in Denver just found the paperwork." Morrison looked apologetic. "It's legal, I'm afraid." "How much?" Lucas asked. $800. Sarah gasped. It was a fortune more than she'd saved in 4 years of work. "I'll pay it," Lucas said immediately. "No." James stepped forward from the shadows. "This is my debt, my mess to clean up." "With respect, Mr. Colleen, do you have $800? Morrison asked. No, but I'll face the consequences. I won't have my daughter's future husband paying for my mistakes again. Father, the house goes to auction tomorrow, Morrison interrupted. Fair and square, anyone can bid. He tipped his hat. Just thought you should know. After he left, the three of them stood in heavy silence. I have 600 saved, Sarah said, from my wages here, and I gave you near 200. James added. That's enough to bid. If no one bids against you, Lucas pointed out. Carter's been looking to expand. He'd love to get his hands on that property, if only to spite us. Sarah sank into a chair, defeat washing over her. After everything, to lose the house anyway. We'll figure something out, Lucas said, kneeling beside her. The house doesn't matter. We have each other. It matters, she whispered. It's all I have of her, of them, before everything went wrong. James made a broken sound. I'll fix this, somehow. I'll fix this. But Sarah could see no way out. Come tomorrow. Her childhood home would belong to the highest bidder, and with it would go the last piece of her mother's dream. The morning of the auction dawned clear and cold. Sarah dressed carefully in her best dress, the blue one that had been Lucas's mother's. If she was going to lose her home, she'd face it with dignity. The crowd gathered early outside the bank. Word had spread, and it seemed half the valley had come to watch. Rebecca Carter stood near the front, her husband beside her, both looking smugly confident. Going once at the opening bid of $300, the auctioneer began. 300, Carter called out immediately. 400, Sarah countered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 500, Rebecca said sweetly. Oh, I do hope we're not bidding against each other. Dear Sarah, that would be so unfortunate. The bidding climbed quickly. 600, 700. Sarah's funds were exhausted, and still the Carters bid higher. 800, Carter said with finality. And I'll go higher if need be. That property connects to my land. It's worth more to me than sentiment. Sarah felt Lucas's hand find hers, squeezing gently. It was over. She'd lost. 850, a new voice called out. Everyone turned to see James Colleen standing at the back of the crowd. But he wasn't alone. The Johnson family stood with him, and the Millers, and a dozen other small ranchers Lucas had helped over the years. What are you doing? Sarah gasped. Mr. Johnson stepped forward. Your father came to us last night, told us what was happening. We pooled our money. He looked at Carter defiantly. That's 850. You want to go higher? Carter's face flushed red. 900. 950. Mrs. Miller called out. We can do this all day. Mr. Carter, question is, how much is spite worth to you? This is ridiculous, Rebecca hissed. They can't all bid together. Actually, they can, Sheriff Morrison said mildly. No law against it. They're bidding as a group, with Mr. Colleen as their representative. All legal and proper. The auctioneer looked between the parties. 950 is the bid. Do I hear 1,000? Carter's jaw worked furiously. His wife tugged at his arm, whispering urgently. Finally, he shook his head. Let them have it. It's just a shack anyway. Sold. The auctioneer's gavel came down. To Mr. James Colleen and Associates for $950. The crowd erupted in cheers. Sarah stood frozen, unable to process what had happened. Her father approached slowly, holding out a piece of paper. The deed, he said simply. In your name this time. Legal and clear. Father, These people, he gestured to the gathered families. They remember what Lucas did for them, what you did. Writing those letters to save their farms, they wanted to return the kindness. His eyes were wet. I may have failed this community, but you didn't. You and Lucas, you've been building something here. something worth saving. Sarah threw her arms around her father, sobbing. Around them, people pressed forward to offer congratulations. Even some who'd whispered about her before seemed caught up in the moment. "Community looks after its own," Cookie said gruffly, having appeared from nowhere. About time this town remembered that. Lucas wrapped his arms around Sarah from behind, his chin resting on her head. "Welcome home," he murmured. "For good this time." "For good," she agreed, leaning back into his warmth. The crowd began to disperse, people heading home with the satisfaction of having done something right. The Carters left in a huff, Rebecca's silk skirt swishing indignantly. James cleared his throat. "I'll be moving on tomorrow. Got a job waiting in Colorado, but I'll be back for the wedding, if you'll have me." Sarah looked up at him, this man who'd broken so much but was trying so hard to mend what he could. "I'd like that," she said. "Mother would have liked it too." He nodded, too overcome to speak, and walked away quickly. "That was something," Lucas said. "This whole town coming together like that." "They didn't do it for me," Sarah said. "They did it for you, for us, for what we represent, that people can help each other, can stand together against those who'd tear them apart." "No," Lucas corrected gently. "They did it because you're one of them now, because you've proven yourself with your work, your courage, your refusal to give up. The town that once gossiped about you just stood up to the richest man in the valley for you." Sarah turned in his arms, looking up at his beloved face. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now. "I should have said it sooner, but I love you, Lucas Wren." His smile was radiant. "Say it again." "I love you." "Once more. I love you, you impossible man. And I'll tell you every day from now on, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He kissed her then, right there in front of the bank, in front of whoever might still be watching. And Sarah kissed him back, no longer caring who saw or what they thought. She was home, really, truly home, in this town that had become hers, with this man who'd waited for her, surrounded by people who'd proven that community meant more than gossip, that redemption was possible, that love could indeed conquer fear. The auction was over, but their life together was just beginning. The storm arrived on the morning of the auction's aftermath, as if the heavens themselves wanted to wash clean the events of the previous day. Sarah stood at the window of the ranch house, watching sheets of rain sweep across the valley. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that rattled the windows. "You're thinking too loud," Lucas said from behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Just remembering," she murmured, leaning back against him. "All those storms we've weathered, literally and otherwise. This one's different, though." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "This time, we're together." A knock at the door interrupted them. Cookie entered, shaking water from his hat. "That father of yours is out in the barn, fixing the roof leak. In this weather, fool man's going to catch his death." Sarah sighed. "I'll talk to him." "I'll go," Lucas said. "You stay warm." But Sarah was already reaching for her shawl. "We'll both go." They found James balanced precariously on a ladder, hammer in hand, rain streaming down his face. He'd nearly finished patching the hole despite the conditions. "Father, get down from there," Sarah called over the storm. "Almost done," he shouted back. "Can't leave a job half-finished." Lucas was already moving to steady the ladder. "Come on down, James. We can finish when the storm passes." But James drove in one more nail, then another. As he reached for a third, lightning struck nearby close enough that they all felt the electricity in the air. James jerked. The ladder swayed, and for a heart-stopping moment it seemed he would fall. Lucas threw his weight against the ladder, holding it firm while James scrambled down. They all ran for the barn's shelter, breathing hard. "That was foolish," Sarah said, her voice shaking. James wiped rain from his face, grinning sheepishly. "Got it fixed, though. Roof won't leak anymore." "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't." His expression grew serious. I've got too much to make up for to die now, including walking my daughter down the aisle next month. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Despite everything, despite years of disappointment and abandonment, he was trying. That had to count for something. The barn door burst open, and Ben Hawkins stumbled in. "Boss, we've got trouble. The creek's rising fast. If it breaks its banks." "The Johnson place," Lucas finished grimly. "They're right in the flood path." Without hesitation, he began issuing orders. "Ben, get Tom and the others. We need every hand. Bring rope, shovels, whatever we can use to build barriers. Cookie, prepare the bunkhouse. We might have refugees." "I'm coming too," Sarah said. "Sarah." "Don't argue with me. Lucas Wren. Not about this." He looked at her, rain-soaked, determined, magnificent, and nodded. "All right, but you stay close to me." "I'll help too," James said. Lucas hesitated only a moment. "Can you handle a team of horses?" "Been doing it longer than you've been alive, son." "Then you're with us." They worked through the storm, the entire ranch mobilized to save their neighbors. The creek had risen dangerously, brown water churning with debris. The Johnson house sat perilously close to the edge, water already lapping at the foundation. Sarah helped Mrs. Johnson and the children to higher ground while the men worked frantically to build barriers. She saw Lucas everywhere directing efforts, hauling sandbags, standing knee-deep in the flooding water to shore up weak points. Her father worked beside him, matching the younger men shovel for shovel. When part of the barrier began to give way, it was James who spotted it first, throwing himself against the breach until others could reinforce it. For hours they battled the rising water. Sarah lost track of time, focused only on the next sandbag, the next person who needed help. Her dress was ruined, her hands raw, but she didn't stop. Finally, miraculously, the rain began to ease. The creek crested just below the barriers they'd built, holding steady instead of overflowing. "We did it," someone breathed. A cheer went up from the assembled workers. The Johnsons wept with relief, their home saved by the community's efforts. Sarah found Lucas slumped against a fence post, exhausted but smiling. She collapsed beside him, not caring about the mud. "You were amazing," he said. "We all were." She looked around at their neighbors, ranchers, townspeople, even some who'd whispered about her just weeks ago, all united in common purpose. This is what community really means. Her father approached, limping slightly. "Think I'm getting too old for this kind of excitement." "You did good, James." Lucas said simply, "Real good. Just trying to earn my place." He looked at Sarah. "I know I can't make up for the past, but maybe I can be part of the future, if you'll let me." Sarah reached out and took his hand. "You already are." As the sun broke through the clouds, painting the valley in gold, people began the slow trek home. The crisis had passed, but something had changed. The artificial divisions that had separated them, wealth, past mistakes, old grudges seemed less important in the face of what they'd accomplished together. That evening, the ranch house filled with neighbors seeking food and rest. Cookie outdid himself, producing enough stew to feed an army. Stories were shared, bonds strengthened, and more than once Sarah heard her name mentioned with respect rather than scandal. "Quite a woman you've got there, Wren." "Mr. Miller said, clapping Lucas on the back. "Not many would have worked like she did today." "I know exactly what I've got," Lucas replied, his eyes finding Sarah across the room. As the evening wore on, someone produced a fiddle. Music filled the house, and despite their exhaustion, people began to dance. Lucas held out his hand to Sarah. "May I have this dance, future Mrs. Wren?" "Always," she said, letting him pull her into his arms. They swayed together, oblivious to the crowd around them. Sarah rested her head on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. "I love you," she whispered, the words coming easier each time. "And I love you," he replied. "Storm or shine, flood or drought, I love you." "That sounds like a vow." "Practice run. I want to get them right for next month." She smiled against his shirt. "They're already right." Her father stood by the fireplace, watching them with a wistful expression. Rebecca Carter had been wrong that day in church. Sarah wasn't her father's daughter in the ways that mattered. She'd inherited his capacity for love. Yes, but also her mother's strength, her mother's ability to build rather than destroy. As if reading her thoughts, James raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. Sarah nodded back, accepting the gesture for what it was: acknowledgement of the past, hope for the future. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. In a month, she would marry Lucas in the small church where she'd once been scorned. Her father would walk her down the aisle. The same people who'd whispered about her would throw rice and wish them well. It wasn't the life she'd imagined at 17, full of grand adventures in far-off cities. It was better. It was real, built on struggle and perseverance and the kind of love that endured through storms. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked. "Home," she said simply. "How I spent so long looking for it when it was here all along." "Not here," he corrected gently. "Here is just a place. Home is you," she finished. "Home is you." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Another storm perhaps building beyond the mountains. But here, in this moment, in the circle of his arms surrounded by their community, Sarah felt nothing but peace. The girl who'd fled in shame had returned a woman. The boy who'd let her go had become a man worth staying for. And the town that had once driven them apart had brought them back together. Outside, the rain had washed the world clean, preparing it for new growth. Inside, two hearts that had wandered separate paths for too long beat as one, finally home. The storm was over. Their life together was just beginning. And somewhere in the distance, thunder promised more storms to come. But Sarah and Lucas would weather them together, anchored by love strong enough to endure whatever winds might blow. For in the end, that's what love was: not the absence of storms, but the promise to stand together when they came, and standing there in his arms, surrounded by the community that had claimed them both. Sarah knew she'd found something worth more than safety, more than certainty. She'd found her way home. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Sarah and Lucas's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it with you. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of their story. Are you listening while driving through the countryside? Maybe relaxing at home after a long day? Or perhaps you're somewhere unexpected. Share your thoughts and let's connect over our love of these frontier tales. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 for more tales of love, adventure, and redemption in the American frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover these heartfelt stories. Your support means the world and helps keep the spirit of the Old West alive. Until next time, partners.